My presentation. But before I go, these are the outlines. Don't be scared about the number of topics there. I will try as brief as possible. We look at some of the history, what has happened, because if we didn't look over our shoulders, what shaped medical education in the future, in the past, you will not know where you are and where you are going. So it's good to know the history of where you came from. And then we look at also where we are now, and then briefly, if time permit, I will talk briefly on history of medical education in Nigeria also. Now, by way of introduction, there is this popular man they call Blexer. They call him Abraham Blexer. He's the main man. Whenever you talk of medical education, if you didn't talk about Abraham Blexer, you have not said anything, because he's the one that shaped medical education in America specifically. Before his report, there are a lot of problems in medical education in the United States of America. That time, they have no common standard at all. Everybody is doing whatever he wants. No any type of certification, no postgraduate training set up at that time. And there are so many medical schools, but they are there because of money making alone. And then they have weak and varied admission standards. In terms of their admission, when you want to go into medical school, some colleges will say you need a degree, while others, what you need is just high school diploma. And then some, you just have a small training with a senior colleague, and then you get into the medical school. So there are a lot of problems, and that's why the Carnegie Foundation asks this gentleman to look into these problems and to have a detailed study on the status of medical education in the United States. So the foundation that sponsored that was Carnegie Foundation. That time, Abraham Blexer was just an educator. He just graduated from Johns Hopkins University at the age of 19. But he has passion on small classes, not large classes where you give didactic lectures. So he formed a school that where he can train small classes, personal attention to students, as well as hand-on teaching. And his school did very well during that time. And this drew the attention of the president of this Carnegie Foundation and asked him to carry out this holistic research on the medical education and the way forward. So, medical education in the United States and Canada, the report was released, and it has a profound effect on education of the physician. And he drew some basic conclusion on that report. And out of those conclusions, he gave several recommendations, and which we are practicing now, even in our medical school. For example, in one of the conclusions, he said medical school with a university-based curriculum design provided the best approach. And this is what we are doing here. And second conclusion was curriculum of the Johns Hopkins should be the gold standard at that time. Okay, things must have changed now. Then the other one is that in general, medical school should have educational program and high quality standards. Now, based on this, he gave this recommendation. Medical school should be affiliated to university, just like our own now. Where all the medical schools you know all over the world, they are affiliated to the university in one way or the other. Then admission standards should be raised. That is why when you see our entrance into medical school, usually the cutoff point is very high if you compare with other faculties. So standard must be raised. And then basic science subjects should be reflected in the training. That is anatomy, physiology, and biochemistry should be reflected during that. These are all things that we practice here. And then we should have an academic model of education and training should be allowed. And then medical schools should all have a high quality of faculty. Members of teachers that teach in that, they must have high quality standard. They must have gone for several courses on medical education. And then clinical training and structured teaching also must be specific goal in the objectives. And lastly, impact of these changes over the following years and decades make a remarkable changes in medical education in the United States. Now this man is another man that whenever you talk of medical education, you must mention his name. They call him Osler. He's a Canadian physician. And his own passion is bedside teaching. He's the one that introduced bedside teaching. And then one of his quotes, he said, who studies medicine without books, sail and charted sea. But he who studies medicine without patient does not go to sea at all. So this is what we are practicing now in Nigeria, bedside teaching in most cases. But time now has changed, simulation has also entered. He also invented medical residency training program. Now in 1982 and 1984, another very important milestone was reached in medical education. And the report of AMA and the other group, GPEP report. The AMA also, they had about 35 recommendations, their group, and they released the report entitled Future Direction for Medical Education in America. And some of the recommendations, it has to do with admissions, how you admit a student into medical school, the education in and training during medical school, then postgraduate and specialty training were also introduced. Then the function of specialty board, licensure and medical education were also introduced at that time. But the most important one is the report released by GPEP, where they indicated that improvement of integration of the curriculum is very important. You have to practice integration of the curriculum, where they also introduce active learning. Because now the emphasis on medical education is to allow the student to take control of their teaching, so that they will have self-directed learning. Instead of coming to give lectures, you give them activities. They go and do it at home, then they come discuss with their peers, and then come out. You will be just as a facilitator. So that is the main thing. And then self-directed learning also is the main thing, and also problem-based learning. Now what happened in the last quarter of 20th century? Entering the last quarter of the 20th century, medical education in US began to have growing pains because of these integrations. Because you deal with smaller groups instead of larger groups, so they need a lot of time. Okay, the major impetus at that time was an explosion of knowledge in the biomedical science. And every fellow or faculty wanted more time for medical students so that you can interact with. And there was also growing interest in increasing integration at that time. But the most important is the educational method started to shift, okay, from how people learn to how versus how we teach the students. This is how the integration started all about. Now in the 21st century, during the first decades of the 21st century, two reports also emerged that stimulate discussion regarding how physicians are trained. And one of them is focused on pre-medical education, while the other dealt with education in the medical school. Okay? These two groups, they were concerned by faculty teaching the pre-medical students that the current course requirements for students interested in entering medical school and the medical school entrance examination might not be putting the student to the best position for successful learners. So they have concern. Now with these two concerns in their mind, they contacted some physicians, scientists, and science educators from large and small college universities in medical school, and they asked them to identify competency. It was at this level competencies started entering into the medical curriculum, because competency is the main thing. You will come to class, give theoretical lectures. By the time our basic student, medical student move to the hospital, they have the knowledge, but they don't know how to relate it with the patient. So that is why this group were asked to identify the competency that graduation students should master prior entering even medical school. And the other task was additional competencies that medical students should demonstrate as they progress toward graduation. And this hope, with the hope that they shift towards competency-based education. This is competency-based education. Then in 2010, there's another Carnegie report, okay, that Ripon Medical School and Residency Training Program. It was released in 2010. The report has 3 authors, and they have visited 11 medical schools and teaching hospitals in the United States. And they also visited 3 non-university teaching hospitals. And they gathered their information through interviews, focus group, personal observations, and a lot of things. And then at the end, they concluded that they gave 4 conclusions, which is very important. The first one is that standardization of learning outcome should be competency-based assessment. The other one, I said competency-based education, and now they are talking of competency-based assessment. Even the assessment should be competency-based. It's not only doing MCQ or written. You have to get the skill and demonstrate it. And secondly, they need to bring integration of knowledge into the clinical experience at all levels. And then thirdly, the student has to develop habits of inquiry and innovation. This is very important also. And finally, professional identity formation was also included in the curriculum. Now this man has his own perspective. In 2012, he observed that the number of patients are shrinking in the wards, even in our place now. The number of patients are shrinking, but the number of medical students are coming in. So he said the number of patients that we need to teach medical students are no more there. We have to think elsewhere. And one of the places is to go to the rural areas. And going to the rural areas also has its own problems, because most of the people in the rural areas, they are not consultants, they are medical officers, they might not give the necessary education. And moving some of this medical equipment is also another problem. So she says, since we are in the globe, there is a technology now, okay, there is digital revolution, why not use the mannequins, the simulations, so that we have more spaces to teach the medical student. Even if there is no patient, we have simulators now that we can do so many things. For example, you can do a carry-out and complete auscultation on the mannequins. So these are some of the ideas of this gentleman. So simulation, everybody knows, but the main thing that medical simulation allows the acquisition of clinical skills through 2 things: deliberate practice rather than apprentice type of learning. And then secondly, simulation tools serve as an alternative to real patients. You can do everything on the mannequins as if you are doing it on real patients. This is an example of mannequins that you can use for setting IV lines. And at this juncture, we must thank Professor Mungadi for this, the simulation lab he established during his time as a provost. You can set line with this, you can take blood sample, you can do so many things. Another one is you can do a full resuscitation. So you don't need a patient to do all this. These mannequins can help you to do all those things. Likewise, the cardiologist can do all his study on this one. Mammals, all type of mammals, we can have them on this kind of mannequin. So medical education has been a major seen a major changes, as we mentioned earlier. Now the teaching is integrated teaching, problem-based learning, community-based learning, co-curriculum with electives or option of a more systematic curriculum planning also. There was also an increasing emphasis that is being placed of self-directed learning study. I mentioned that one, with students expect to take responsibility of their learning nowadays. And then for teaching method to be appropriate, the characteristics of the learner is very important. You have to know who are you teaching. It's not just coming to the class and start giving lecture. You have to characterize your learners, know their limitations. You have to know their limitations. Some are easy to get what you are saying. Some is very difficult. Okay, so you have to know that. And the type of learning is supposed to be bring. Then the teaching method also must take into account not only the nature of subject matter, okay? Not only the nature of the subject matter, but also how students learn, okay? Because in today's school, the trend is that it encourages creativity. You stimulate the students to become very creative, okay? And it is a known fact that human advancement comes through reasoning, thorough reasoning. And this reasoning, if added with original thought, enhances creativity. So where are we now? Where are we now is curriculum integration. We just have to integrate our curriculum, not the normal curriculum we know, which is just course-based. You just give your lecture. You have to integrate basic and clinical at the same time. So the general trend is being followed as a medical school makes significant curricular change and has been moved away from an educational program consisting discipline-based course to an integrated curriculum or mixed curriculum. So this is where we are going. And a mixed curriculum, an integrated curriculum, typically you move through various body systems like cardiovascular system, respiratory, and the rest. And at the same time, you give the anatomy lecture so that you can correlate and integrate. Well, when you do the mixed type, this one you can start with some short courses, providing fundamental information on anatomy, cell biology, and the rest. And then as you move to the next level, you can start the integration. So this is a combination of both. Now, what is the whole things about this integration? One, we want to reduce the lecture hours. That is why we are integrating this thing. And then we want to move away from a teacher-centered learning to a student-centered learning. Okay, it's the student that will come and teach themselves. You as a teacher, you'll be just a facilitator. You'll be there, but you'll be as a facilitator. Okay, the increased time of availability of self-directed learning. So you have the increased time for them, give them assignment, go and read, and then come back. And then that is what they call flip classroom. Then you reduce unnecessary redundancy between courses also, and provide less compartmentalization of teaching and testing, and then promote topic integration. Okay, so this one is, if you find yourself as a course coordinator, there are certain principles that you should remember. Okay, and one of them is that presentation of the material content should promote active learning, not passive learning. In your curriculum, always encourage active learning, not passive learning. Passive learning, student will just come and listen to a lecture without saying a single anything during the lecture period. You have to engage the student. Let them talk also as you are talking. Then you create the active learning. And also, the days of sitting through long hours of continuous hours of lecturing is gone now. They have abolished long lectures, didactic lectures now in the modern medical education area. Although lectures can also still play a important role in education, evidence demonstrates that learning and retention improve through the use of more interactive. Because we are yet to graduate to that level, we can also, as we are giving the lectures, make it interesting, bring some interactive passion into it, and the student will learn more. Some that will be sleeping while you are doing lecture will definitely wake up. So the reform movement and integration, we have mentioned that active learning and less passive learning. So what are these integration? The initial implementation involved partial integration. So we have what we call horizontal integration. This is defined as integration across discipline, but within a finite period of time. While the vertical integration is representing integration with breakdown of traditional barriers, okay? All those barriers that is not connecting from basic to clinical, as you are going, you are breaking them, trying to bring some of clinical ingredients into the basic sciences. So that is what is called vertical integration. The fully integrated curriculum is characterized as the spiral one, that is the combination of both horizontal and vertical integration. Let me talk briefly on some of these teaching method or instructional method. The popular one is this problem-based learning. This is a student-centered, not teacher-centered learning, okay? Where you give the students an open-ended problem for them to solve. So usually you give them the problem and the student will go home, do their research, come and interact with their teachers, with their colleagues, exchange ideas, because most of the open-ended problems, there are so many ways you can solve them. The idea you have, it might not be my own idea, so we sit down and share those ideas and come out to the problem. You, the teacher, as a facilitator, you'll be there and you'll be directing them. This is a typical example of PBL. It's a class that we attended, me and Professor Isezo in Philadelphia. It's a case given to us. You can see Professor Esiodo scratching his. I was there also talking. This is a typical one. It's just few number of students in a group. You give them problems, go and read, and then you come and discuss the case. And this one is also activity. At times you have to show some role play in your classroom to just ginger the students. This is a clear indication and activity where they want to downplay didactic lectures. So this one I was holding, what I'm holding is the lecture. And the lecturer was holding a small cup, and she's trying to teach us by removing all the topics. By the time she put 1 or 3 things, the whole cup was already full. So by the time you start didactic lecture, after some time, some people will start playing with their handset. They'll start talking to each other. So you have to create some activity. Everybody will be awake and will follow you. Then team-based. If you put team-based learning and traditional learning, if you look at this line, from here to here is all lectures, trying to acquire the concept of the lecture. And then when it comes to application, this is the only time you have. This is not allowed. Most of your time is acquiring the concept. When it comes to application, so what team-based does, you give the student a reading to go and read. And when they come, based on what they read, you give them small test. They call it readiness test assessment. And they have a lot of time for application. Creativity, self-directed learning. That is the whole essence here. There's also what we call case-based learning. It's a student-centered also teaching that exposes students to real-world case scenarios and that need to be solved using their reasoning skills and existing theoretical knowledge. So they combine the theory and their reasoning skill here to solve the problem. These cases usually offer analytical and problem-solving skill allowed pragmatic application of new knowledge and skill to the challenging situation. These are, as we know, is a higher level learning thinking. So you give the student prior reading to go and read, and after that, either the case is just a real case or it's a standardized patient. You give a standardized patient to the patient, or it's just a video you play to the patient, to the learner, and then they discuss, and your role here as a facilitator is to be active. This one is to tell you that teacher-centered teaching is not the norm now, because when you come to give lecture, it's only the teacher that is in charge. Nobody talks unless the teacher asks you. But it has its drawback. Some students may get bored. As you are giving the lecture, they are already bored. They are not interested and may not pay attention and can miss some information because their attention is not there. But more importantly, the collaboration that they miss between their colleagues. You do not create the collaboration between to discuss what you are discussing. So they miss that, and then the crucial thinking also they miss it. Therefore, they fail to develop communication and crucial thinking as well. So therefore, creating an environment in which students can learn effectively and efficiently become a new prerequisite, demanding not only the teachers are experts in their field, but also, more importantly, they understand how their students learn. This is very important. You have to understand as a teacher how your students learn. This is a typical didactic lecture. At times you can have control of this class, but very difficult to have a control. So it's now almost abolished. Maybe with time we also abolish it here. Then the current concept introduced what we call the third pillar of medical education. This revised design also added a content addressing broader issues constituting health system science as a third pillar of medical education, which can co-equal it with basic and clinical medical sciences. Topics included in the new curriculum now include population health, health policy, healthcare delivery system, and interdisciplinary care. And there was a study that correlates is the replacement of biomedical model of health and disease with a broader, now they introduce biopsychosocial in addition to all the other things. Model health of health and disease and patient-physician relationship. It's very important. All the training we give medical school should gear towards cordial relationship with the patient. Always put the patient in front of the student. Also in the new medical education curriculum reform include heavy emphasis on what Professor Oche has already talked, professionalism, professional identity development, and the reform are also aimed at achieving more coherent continuum of medical education. Professionalism, it has already been taught in medical education, but what I want to emphasize here, even here in our medical school, we are now saying those that are not MBBS holder will not teach our students. It has gone to that now. Now time will come, not our time, that if you don't have medical education degree, hear this one, if you don't have medical education degree, you might not teach in medical school. This is the way how it is moving. So it's very important to take medical education as serious as it is. Nowadays, teachers need to be an information provider, an assessor, facilitator, planner, resource developer as a role model, what the students should learn. The General Medical Practice in UK, they published a book in 1993 or so. They call it The Doctor as a Teacher. And one of the quotes says, and I quote, "Teaching skills are not necessarily innate. We are not born with it. Teaching skill, we learn it. And those who accept, like us, special responsibility of teaching should take steps to ensure that they develop and maintain the skill of a competent teacher." So since you answer yourself as a teacher, you have to develop that skill of competency. That is where the curriculum is going now. Ethics and professionalism and interprofessionalism in the curriculum is also a major goal of the new curriculum, and development of holistic ethical position with a clear communication skills. Okay, clear communication skill imbued with empathy and compassion for the patient. So when we are training medical students, we have to imbibe this and then train them so that they will have this skill also as they graduate. There is long-standing consensus, professionalism and professional identity formation need to be the key element of medical education. However, unifying theoretical theories or practical model of integration teaching professionalism into medical has already emerged. Nonetheless, role modeling and personal reflections. If a teacher can do role modeling and also some personal, ideally guided by faculty, rather than giving block of lectures, didactic lecture, these are said they are the most effective technique in developing professionalism. These two things, role modeling and personal reflection. The other one is interprofessional education, or some call it interprofessional education or interprofessional IPE. This refers when students from two more professions in the health and social, they care to learn together during all or part of their professional training with the objective, very important, of cultivating collaboration, collaborative practice for providing the client or patient-centered healthcare. Okay, they put here together the nurses, the medical records, and all what have you. All what you have is patient-centered learning, so that you bring the good patient-centered care. What are the characteristics of a medical student nowadays? Because you have to characterize your student whether you like it or not, because they are not the same. The way they learn, you have to characterize them. You have to know their strengths, vulnerabilities, present some with special challenges. You have to know, and you know how to teach them. It's very important. Notably, if you look at the student with high IQ, in most cases they hardly read. Some of them will not even attend the lectures, but they are interested in playing with the handset, video, and the rest. So if you can bring that one into the teaching, it will bring them to the class, because they will be very creative. Okay, and then there are so many softwares in the internet that make the student very lazy, like the first aid, firecrackers, osmosis, phantomas. They are all lecture-based softwares that you can use on the internet. So you have to know how to characterize your students. Then also in the curriculum, they make emphasis on the impact of the evaluation. Because you can see that I wrote why 50%. We don't know why this 50% was paid as a pass limit. Because this one was asked by Professor Isezu. I don't know whether it's around. During our training, he asked one of our professors from Kills University, And when he asked her level, and she was taken aback, she said, for the past 20 years, nobody has asked her this question, and she has been waiting for this question. So if Professor Eseva is around, can share the outcome of their discussion. So when we say evaluation, in other words, is standard setting, how you assess your students, whether a pass or fail, and the rest. So it's known as minimum pass level that separate competent students from those who are not. And the process of determining this special score is called standard setting. And we have two types. Non-reference, which is the relative one, and this is standard setting method used when fixed proportion of examinees are required to pass. We have already standardized that so percentage of students are going to pass. While the criteria reference, which is the absolute, they use the ANGOP and the borderline regression. Okay, deal with desirable competency. So emphasis here is competency level. So in this type of setting, hypothetically one can say all examinees may pass or fail the test with an absolute standard. So student functions is linked on how they are evaluated. And there are the current movement to abolish grades in exams and honors also, to mitigate undue competitiveness, stress, general malaise in the presence of educational mood. For many years, standard system of student evaluation was based on numerical grades, and in every course are led to the cumulative of numerical score and class ranking. As a component of disruptive innovation, some medical schools now have completely abolished the grade and implemented the pass or fail system, as in our own case. However, some medical schools now they grade it into honors, high pass, pass, marginal pass, or fail. Now, what are the impacts of this integration of medical educators? Over the years, medical educators include only basic and medical science educators, and they have to adopt the current changes. And they have experienced significant challenges in the implementation. I'm sure when it comes to time also we'll start integrating curriculum, we face similar problem. There's competing demand on faculty time because we deal with so many groups. There are a lot of stress and burnout of faculty as well as learners. And then the faculty curriculum heavily geared a small group of teaching places, further considerable demand of faculty time. And there was a research that showed, there was a significant research that showed inverse relationship has found between faculty members' readiness to change teaching approaches and to their severity of burnout. So there are a lot of commitment that we have to go when we want to enter into integrated curriculum. Then what are the foundation principles of medical educators? There are a lot of them, Royal Model and all what have you. But what interests me most important is never mention in your class when you are teaching, never mention or downgrading words to any of the students. Throughout our staying in Philadelphia for the 2 visits we went there, whatever rubbish you say, they will never say you are wrong. But they will politically tell you, could it be this, could it be that? This is very important, because if you start saying you are very dull, you don't know anything, it's downgrading. So you have to be very careful of the word you use to students. It's very important. So let's talk briefly. This is the last slides, 1 or 2 slides from my lecture. History of medical education in Nigeria. During the pre-colonial era, you know what has happened. Traditional practice had their training through apprenticeship, usually under relatives conversant with the art of healing. And it is still happening, because last 2 weeks I was in Kano, in front of a teaching hospital. Aminu Kano Teaching Hospital. There are lines of traditional healers with their herbs. And I saw women and children queuing to see that particular person. And then beside it, there's a pharmacy. So these things still happen around us. Then it is still mentioned the medical care in some Nigerian institutions. The first formal attempt at offering medical education in Nigeria was in 1927, when the government decided to set an institution of training of medical manpower at the diploma level with the objectives as follows: But the summary of the objective is primary health care. And I don't know where we got it wrong, because the emphasis was not on the primary health care, but the initial curriculum was advised to be based on the primary health care. Then growth of medical school in Nigeria, the Ashabi Commission, if you could remember, on higher education in Nigeria recommended the establishment of more training center. Okay, it was therefore decided to expand the facilities in Ibadan and increase to establish new medical school in Lagos and in other northern Nigeria. The regional government decided then to establish their universities with them and then produce the medical education also, medical centers also, faculties. That was Zaria, Enugu, Ile-Ife, and Benin. The first one is Ibadan, then these are the second generation universities. Then we know this regulation, how it comes about, NUC and the MDCN, they are the one monitoring our. Then what are the issues? Medical education delivery in Nigeria, the delivery. Up till now, we are more of bedside teaching. But thank God simulation is now coming. But still 90% of our teaching now is bedside. But we are graduating toward clinical skill centers. And then most of our lectures, they wrote what they call rote memorization. Much of the undergraduate medical education is rote, is habitual memorization. You just give the lecture, student just memorize and come and write the lecture. This rote memorization also used to cause problems between the teacher and the students, and it has nothing to do with the patient. So you have to do away with that. That is why they want to discourage lectures. Some lectures are also a problem, because in certain lectures, 17% of the students have been reported to routinely be attending lectures, and after that 16 of the attendees usually sleep during the lecture. And in Nigerian schools have to resort to making roll calls, so we take attendance as we go to the lecture. And then the teaching in most medical schools is teacher focused, not student centered learning, so we have to change to that also. Then we have talked about the grading system, is the same thing as we do it. Then what are the problems of medical education in Nigeria? And the first is staff shortage. While the number of candidates we are admitting into the schools has increased, and we cannot meet the demands of these students. And the number of qualified teachers to teach, the number is decreasing. So shortage has led to some of us to become very nomadic, moving from one place to another to teach, from one university to another. But we must accept that as much as they are, that is just nomadics, are providing needed services, because the law agreed to them to go and at least visit two universities to teach. But you know that they will never be efficient, because either your primary place will suffer, or if you go there, you are in a hurry to teach and come back, so they will never be efficient. And they are unreliable, their services are unreliable, which ultimately deleterious. So their efficiency cannot be guaranteed, because they are human beings, cannot be everywhere at the same time. So definitely there will not be efficiency. Then quality of staff. This is another problem facing medical school. Whereas medical schools are expanding in an exponential rate, demand for intake, the production of teachers is at the lower rate. There is many departments now headed by academics whose only exposure of teaching is that obtained during the residency training program. And most of us are product of that. We have to believe on that. So we have to seek knowledge on medical aid. It should be apparent to us that we want to be a better teacher, we need some training in teaching to improve our output. This will make us useful in our students improving their outcomes. The lack of modern learning assessments is also another problem in medical education in Nigeria, because we only give lectures, practical and clinical teaching. All these ones are promoting rote memorization. And most of the reason why we don't know what a medical education, we don't even know what to ask our university to buy. So we have to get the knowledge first. So in conclusion, globally medical education has undergone holistic curriculum transformation, with the whole aim of allowing the student to take charge of their learning and didactic learning. Curriculum integration is the norm now by breaking the barriers between preclinical and clinical teaching. Additionally, new teaching methods and assessment methods were also added in the new curriculum. Now, suggestion for improving the role of university medical education in Nigeria, we need to develop curriculum integration in our medical school. Community development, community medical education like this one for all faculty, especially in relation to new instructional methods, assessment method, standard setting, and curriculum integration. We need to also bring new issues, therefore, such as ethics and medical research, as well as management, like the lecture our CMD gave. So we need to train our teachers to be better teachers. Part of the requirement for accreditation should be availability of teaching aids in our universities. Thank you very much.